Hello. I've just arrived. I'm quite late and stressed. I have an exhibition coming up soon, and then I've sort of been up all night. So if I make no sense at all, that's my excuse. I've got a good excuse. This is Barney. He he sits with me when I work. He has separation anxiety, which is why I brought him in. And then the other one is that she's very shy. Come on. Come on. She's following a trail of croissants. Come on. She's 15. She was given to me as a puppy by, do you know Nick Fidian Green, the sculptor? The big horse's head in Hyde Park Corner, the huge drinking head. Anyway, I helped him with that, and she was the present. Come on. So I'm going to chat to you for a little while. I haven't really written anything. I apologize for that, but I thought I'd just tell you a bit of my journey into art and what I do with it. When I first started drawing, my best friend was killed, and my immediate response was just like Forrest Gump, was to begin drawing. It was my only way of sort of making sense of the existence, I think. And I drew in London for a long time on streets and just drew buildings. And I remember a woman came up to me with 2 children, and she stopped and she looked at what we were doing, and then for a while didn't say anything, and then walked away. And I heard her say to her children, "That's what will happen to you if you don't do your homework." and I did find it funny, on the basis that I probably hadn't done my homework. My life has just been spent drawing. And I remember when I was 20, I've only met I don't know if you've ever met any members of the royal family, you probably have, but I've only met them once, and I met them all together, which is a bit terrifying. And it was at a party. And when I don't know, you're not really meant to speak to the Queen unless she speaks to you, and I kind of did. And I really screwed up. Like the one time I met the Queen, I really made a mess of it, twice in one evening. And I was feeling terrible about it. And right at the end of the night, I don't know why, I was at this do, anyway, long story. And I was walking down a long corridor, and there were paintings, and I was looking at the paintings. I was quite drunk. And I was looking at these paintings, portraits, and I saw a tiny figure at the end of the corridor. So I kept walking. It was about 12, maybe half 12 at night. And as she came close, I realized it was the Queen Mother. And it was just me and her in this long corridor. And she looked at me, and she said hello, and she's really tiny. And she said, "Who are you?" And I said, "I'm Charlie, and I'm really sweaty, and I'm really sorry." And I was really unkempt and quite drunk. And she said, "Oh, that's okay." And she said, "Have you had a nice night?" And I said, "Well, to be honest, I really kind of screwed up with your daughter." And she said, "Well, what have you done?" I said, "Oh, well, I got nervous and said things that I shouldn't have done, and then the less she replied, the more I spoke, and eventually she reversed and went away. And I did it again, but worse. And anyway, she said something to me which kind of changed. Well, it was a seminal sentence in my life. She just said, "Everyone is messy, Charlie. You all mess up." And I said, "Yes, you're right." And then she was smiling at me, and she said, "What do you do?" And I said, "Oh, I draw. I try to draw." And she said, "That's a very brave thing to do." And it was like getting hit with a wet fish in the face, because I'd never considered it as a brave choice. I just did it like Forrest Gump walked, I drew. And I said, "Do you think so?" She said, "Yeah, I think it's a courageous choice, and I wish you all the courage." And I can't remember how she concluded, but she just wished me well. But be brave, she said, and carry on making a mess. It's fine. And I remember she said, "And would it be really all right if I said I have to go to sleep now?" And she disappeared. And I said, "Who am I to say otherwise? You're the Queen Mother." But the point was that she delivered a line to me which has been a kind of quiet mantra in my system ever since, which was, it's fine to make a mess. And it's a very brave thing to do, to choose this life. And I try to encourage, I think I come across so many people, like if I fast forward my life to now, I found myself working a lot, I have done, and volunteer with people who have who live with Alzheimer's. And I do groups and I teach them to draw, but most of them, when we begin, and it's a sort of new crowd, none of them want to do it on the basis they've been told they're rubbish. So, and I said, well, do you enjoy drawing? Do you enjoy making marks on paper? They say, yes, we enjoy it, or I enjoy it, but I don't want to do it because I'm not very good. And I say, well, why don't we abandon the idea of being good? Why don't we abandon the idea of any kind of merit? Why don't we just try to make as much mess as we can? So when did you last enjoy this process? And they said, when I was 7 or 8. They're now 80 or 70s, 80s. I said, so let's pretend that you're 7 again. And let's just not care. And let's just, once you've made your mess, put it in the bin and do it again. And try to remember how it feels to really enjoy this. And no one's going to tell you whether it's good or bad. Though you can't make a bad mark. There's no wrong or right. Just enjoy it. And so what we try to do is eliminate the result or expectation result by focusing on how it feels to make this stuff. And a lot of them, 1 or 2 of them, one lady I remember for 6 months would only make 2 marks. And she would keep asking me, is this wrong? Is this okay? Are you sure this is okay? And it was like, where did this come from? She said, well, I was always told that I wasn't any good. So basically we journeyed into this it was a little group that I had for 3 years who became very vulnerable. With every week they journeyed into making a mess, and Trevor used to wear rubber gloves because he didn't like the mess. He was a cabbie in Kingston, ex-cabbie. And bit by bit, as the journey progressed, what happened to the group was not only did these drawings become explosive, but things happened. 1, they regularly cried. I used to play music, regularly cried, and they didn't know why. 2, some of them who were quite socially isolated began to really communicate with each other to the point where by the end of it, it was like a classroom in a school trying to get them to shut up. Because it was so like, I didn't want them to shut up, but you know how you pretend that you do. And so what I'm saying is that I think the process of being allowed to make a mess, actually the irony is that some of those drawings now, Trevor's particularly, hang next to, one's next to Frank Auerbach, one's next to Lucian Freud. So that wasn't my intention. My intention was never for them to make good drawings. My intention was for them to enjoy each other, the process, connection, shared vulnerability, a journey with each other. All these things in retrospect I see happened. I didn't know where we were going with it, but all I can say is that it's one of the greatest privileges I've ever had in my life to encourage someone, A, that it's okay to make a mess. And I have the Queen Mum's sentence in my head still, it's fine, do it, and have the courage to do it. But while you're doing it, leave your head out of it, because your head has an editor, and the editor's always going, oh, well, that will get you probably an F or a 30%, or whatever it is, however things are graded. Leave that out and try to work directly from your heart, soul, spirit, whatever it is in here, through your arm onto the paper. Feel it. And tell the world how you feel. And they discovered voices, their own voice. So Trevor particularly had always struggled with communicating, really. I think he'd just been a cabbie and Basil. There were a few of them that were just remarkable people, but the more they drew, the more it released in terms of how they communicated with each other. So there's a whole dynamic going on. With Alzheimer's, one of the problems with it, as I understand, I'm not an expert, is that it makes you socially withdraw, you become silent, you become hidden, you become fearful. And I always remember one session which was heartbreaking. Was in my little group. In came Steve. I'd never met Steve before, but Steve was a friend of Malcolm's. And Malcolm looked at Steve, and Steve said, "It's coffee time, Malcolm." Malcolm looked at him and said, "Sorry?" And he said, "It's our coffee time." And Malcolm said, "Sorry, I don't know who you are." And Steve said, "It's Steve. We're friends." And it was this terrible moment where there was this complete blank. And that kind of was a seminal moment for everyone. Everyone looked, and what was amazing about that class was they, instead of being strange towards Malcolm, they talked to Malcolm. They said it was okay, Malcolm, don't worry, Malcolm. And there were tears coming down Malcolm's face, and he was confused, but he kept drawing. He only ever drew the Nile. He just drew the Nile. It was fine to draw the Nile. I think he lived there when he was young. So just all his memories of the Nile would come back. But all I'm saying is there's a degree of, once vulnerability begins with making art together and making a mess together, what you get is connection. Then what you then get is communication. Then you get belonging, and then you get community. And you get all these things that actually this society seems to be losing. But I think, things like this, getting people together who've never drawn, who don't want. I'm not saying that drawing is the answer to everything. And we can do a lot. You can sing, you can whatever. But for me, in my little world, I discovered that that I think to make art is an extremely vulnerable thing to do. I think it's a brave thing to do. But I think there's a sort of classic idea that the artist sits in his garret alone, beating his chest, and I think that's a wrong impression. I think there should be let's sort of get everyone together more, work together more, and have groups together more, and journey together more. And we did exhibitions in Kingston of these people's work. It was hysterical, and they were really strong little drawings that they managed to produce, and the pride in them. But actually, the pride ultimately wasn't the drawings. The pride was they somehow, they came as a group. They came as this new group and friends and laughed, and they mocked each other in a loving way. And I think that for me is one of the, oddly, because you look at your life and think, well, I've done this and done that, and aren't I clever? But actually, ultimately, for me, the greatest privilege I've ever had is watching a sealed human, a fearful, sealed, contained human expand and communicate just because they start making a mess with their hands. And look at the next person, and they look at each other, and they laugh, and they talk. Who are you? Where do you live? Da 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 da. And so I just think there is huge hope in all of this. I just hope that this country can, as a people, can keep looking towards this kind of thing as a way of working. Joanne asked me to talk about one little thing, which is this summer I spent a month with a Holocaust survivor called Morris, who I'd been asked to teach him to draw. I didn't know he's a Holocaust survivor. Until, into one of the drawings we're doing, I said, why don't you sort of draw something from your childhood? And he started drawing a barrack. And he said, I helped build this. And I said, where was that, a farm building? He said, no, this was in Plaszow. This was in a Polish concentration camp where I was. And over 4 weeks, he hadn't really ever spoken of this time. He never spoke, but as he drew, he started drawing the steps, the sewage system, a couple of his friends, an SS guard. He drew these things, and bit by bit, his emotions followed. And again, it was one of the greatest privileges I've ever had to see someone access what they felt and get it out. And this is a school, and I remember I'm talking about people who are in their 80s, but I think this process has to begin when you're 8 or 5 or 4. But why is there such a huge chasm often between the end of school, or when an art teacher, bless them, or whatever, or a system says, okay, you're not so good at this, try that. And what you do until you're 8 is you abandon a very valid, important process that you could have kept going. You could have kept doing it, but because you didn't quite make the grade, you lost it until you end up in an old people's home and some idiot like me comes along and says, try this. But what a pity that is. And for me, all I would say is that I think, if we can, I was doing a class the other day with lots of 10-year-olds, and we were talking about imagination, and I said, how do you enjoy your imagination? We thought it was wonderful, because the kids would say, well, when I'm in a lesson, the teacher's talking about this, I can just imagine that I'm skiing, and it's incredible. And actually, I've got wings, and the snow is pink. And so he just went off on this whole imaginative thing, and I said, what happens? Do you think you'll always have this imagination? Will it always be there? And the boy at the back just put his hand up and said, no. And I said, well, why do you think that is? He said, well, you grow up. And what happens when you grow up? Well, look at my parents, they haven't got an imagination. And I said, why does that happen? Would you like for that not to happen? And they said, yeah, we'd like to keep it. And I said, well, how do you think you're going to keep your imagination alive? How are you going to keep imagining pink snow? How are you going to keep using this this incredible thing the human brain has. How can we keep that going? And we had this huge debate about it, with the conclusions were obviously legion, and they all had their own ways of doing it. All I can say is, don't stop making your messy drawings just because we talked about art. So don't give up just because it's not your subject. Don't give up. Just keep your mind alive to everything that anyway. So we went on like that. So all I'm saying is, I don't want there to be a chasm between, oh, I did that at school, oh, now I'm in an old people's home and I suppose I should try. What a waste of that time. Because in that time, I'm not saying you have paintings in the Royal Academy, I'm just saying you enjoyed making things. And for your brain, it's really healthy, like proven so, and wards off Alzheimer's, singing, painting, drawing, all those things. I think I've bored you enough. And I don't think it's very conclusive. I only really came here to say that whole idea of making a mess is fine, and be free to do it. Relish the mess, and from the mess will come, in the end, beauty, but it doesn't really matter if it doesn't. And just have the courage to do it. And I think with schools, there should be an amnesty, a day a month, where there is nothing is graded, where all art, whatever you're doing, is not great. You just make a mess. Reckless. That'll be it. Thank you.